Good morning and welcome to this week's very distinctive Headmaster's blog with the theme of grandparents to mark a special edition newsletter in their honour. It's Friday the 3rd of July. So here is a flavour of my childhood. It's very stream of consciousness and quite carefully written, but it's really hard to describe something so personal in any other way. They are just wonderful memories of wonderful folk. So do bear with me, and here goes. As a child, my sister and I were fortunate to have 4 active grandparents who fulfilled the classic stereotype of kindness, laughter and love. When you're blessed with a strong family unit, the natural thing to do is to take it for granted, and it was not until many years later that we realised some other girls and boys were not so lucky. Looking back with an adult sense of perspective, I can see now that my 2 sets of grandparents were really quite different. On my mother's side, my grandparents were hearty Devonian stock, born of the dairy farm and the sea. They were comfortably off, and they lived in the most fabulous detached house in several acres of private land. We used to spend every Christmas and summer there, and it was truly idyllic. Grandma was from a well-to-do family, older than my grandpa by a couple of years, and she never let him forget it. But he needed keeping in check, being a larger-than-life character who swaggered about the county with mock bluster, attending Rotary and Conservative events with great gusto. His nickname was aptly the King of Devon. Grandma's favourite story was about Grandpa laying siege to her house until she finally accepted his proposal of marriage. I always wondered why she took so long to make up her mind, but eventually we discovered that she had another suitor and more than one offer on the table. She must have been quite a catch. I also recall that Grandpa used to only ever buy British cars, until he became so exasperated with one of his many Rovers breaking down that he switched overnight to Japanese Nissans and never looked back. As a proud veteran of World War II, that must have been a tough call for him to make. Grandpa was one of those people who signed up to go to war on the very first day. He started out as a lowly private and ended up a major. One of the only times I ever saw him express a sense of resentment was when he described being passed over for promotion to the very highest ranks because he did not go to the right school. He was a farm lad, made good, who used to walk a 10-mile round trip to class every day. And thanks to his charisma and determination, he made the best of his lot. But he never forgot that burning sense of injustice, and he made sure that his own children could not be discriminated against in the same way. When I was undertaking a history project as a teenager about the rise of fascism, I tried to talk to him about his experience of the war, but like so many of his generation, he preferred to keep those dark times safely hidden away. However, Grandma told me about a secret box containing souvenirs from his time in the Royal Signals. It was only after his death in 2005 that I was able to finally look inside. There were numerous medals, several mentions in dispatches for bravery, and a gun with live ammunition. The man was a hero. There were not too many things in common between the grandparents on my mother's side and those on my father's side. However, one was definitely an unadulterated commitment to family values, and another was an enormous sense of parochialism to Devon and Yorkshire respectively. My father grew up in Headingley, Leeds, in a terraced Victorian house that I sought out on a recent visit to the city. It is now quite a vibrant student area, but in those days it was extremely poor, and quite reminiscent of those black and white urban photographs that you sometimes see of small children kicking a ball about on a cobbled street with washing lines in the backdrop. Prospects in life were significantly defined by passing and failing the 11+ examination, and my father was the first in the family to attend grammar school and then university. Ironically, this was viewed with great suspicion at the time. My grandparents were staunch Methodists, directly connected via their forebears to the very early origins of the Wesleyan Church, and both came from large families. Grandpa, for example, was the youngest of 8. He was a really handy cricketer, playing for Yorkshire as a youth, and one of my greatest sporting moments was taking my first adult league wicket as a schoolboy, with him watching on from behind the bowler's arm. "That were a corker, lad," he said proudly. During the war, Grandpa enlisted with the Royal Medical Corps, and thanks to seeing his handwritten diary some 50 years later, I was astonished to learn that he was in the front line of Allied troops who liberated the infamous Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in April 1945. The harrowing images that he must have seen, as still a relatively young man, are best not imagined. Both Grandma and Grandpa were incredibly humble and unassuming. However, for intelligent individuals, they were also remarkably irrational at times. They never boarded an aeroplane and were reluctant travellers. On the single occasion that I recall getting into a car with them with my sister, they got confused at a roundabout and we ended up driving the wrong way down the motorway. So it was probably for the best for everyone else's safety that they seldom ventured anywhere. They met at Sunday school in a Methodist band as childhood sweethearts and spent their entire lives together. Grandma especially had a wealth of talent and could have thrived in her own right in a more recent era. Demure and shy, she played the piano, painted, and loved poetry. She could still recite long epics that she had learned by heart as a child, well past her 90th birthday. In the last year of her life, Grandma was still volunteering to help with pensioners' lunches at her local church. When it was gently pointed out to her that as the eldest member of the congregation by some way, it might be time for someone to reciprocate, she steadfastly refused to countenance it. A most remarkable lady, she simply believed that she was born to serve. I owe my grandparents an enormous debt of gratitude for the care and love that was bestowed upon me in my formative years. In their own way, each of them has had a lifelong influence upon me in terms of the person I have become, the way that I want to raise my family, and in the core values that I wish to instill in other people's children as an educator. Ultimately, being a grandparent is great fun, but also a great responsibility. And if wielded with the right balance of affection and guidance, the benefits can be profound. A big thank you to all of our grandparents here at Kingswood House. You are greatly appreciated by us all, and we look forward to seeing you here at the school in the not too distant future. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the special edition newsletter this week. Thank you.